morning, everyone. Welcome to the ESIC seminar. Our speakers today are Mr. Jeff Dagle from Pacific Northwest National Lab and Dr. Noel Schulz from Washington State University. Mr. Dagle is co-director of the Advanced Grid Institute, a joint institute with WSU. He has numerous projects in the area of transmission. He has led numerous projects in the areas of transmission reliability and security. He is a senior member of IEEE and National Society of Professional Engineers. He received his BS and MS degrees in electrical engineering from Washington State University in 1989 and 1994, respectively, and is a registered professional engineer in the state of Washington. Dr. Schulz is the Edmund O. Schweitzer III Chair in Power Apparatus and Systems with the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, Washington State University. She has been a chief scientist at the Pacific Northwest National Lab since February 2020 and serving a joint appointment as part of PNNL WSU Advanced Grid Institute. She's also serving as a co-director of AGI. She received her BSEE and MSEE degrees from Virginia Tech and PhD in EE from University of Minnesota. Dr. Schulz has been active for over 26 years in teaching, research, and service at 6 US universities. So today's seminar will highlight the key elements of the new strategic plan and how the colleagues from Pacific Northwest National Lab and Washington State University and its partners can contribute to the Advanced Grid Institute mission of promoting the research and evolution of advanced grid modeling to support planning and operations of complex power systems of the future and its workforce. So I welcome both Dr. Schulz and Mr. Dagle to the talk today and take it away.
All right. Can you see her okay? Yes? Jeff?
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, great. All right. So Jeff, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Anamika, for the great introductions. I think the key thing I wanted to add to my bio is that in the summer of 1987 and the summer of 1988, I interned at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory as an undergraduate student. And so my connection between WSU and PNNL goes way back to then. And we are looking forward to having opportunities of hosting students as interns and other mechanisms for students to engage directly with the research that we're doing here. But specifically today, what Dr. Schulz and I want to talk about is the Advanced Grid Institute, and more specifically, the strategic plan that we put together for the AGI. That we spent quite a bit of the year 2021 working on this strategic plan, and so we want to share with you some of the highlights of AGI, but also the strategic plan and where we're going next. No?
Okay, so this is just a quick outline of what we're going to talk about. We're going to give an overview of the creation and evolution of AGI. Then we'll talk about the strategic planning process, as well as highlights from the strategic plan, and then really start to talk about how we're going to put this plan into action with our AGI 2022 plan, and then open it up for Q&A. So we welcome people putting stuff in the chat. We'll be tag teaming on the presentation, so when the other person's talking, we might be able to answer some questions along the way.
So what is the Advanced Grid Institute? So the Advanced Grid Institute is a joint institute between the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory and Washington State University. It is one of 3 joint institutes that were launched in 2018. And these were picked by management and leadership at PNNL and WSU in areas where we're already working together closely in certain technical areas. In the grid area, both Washington State University and the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory are recognized as global leaders in grid R&D. We do a lot of work in the electric power grid research and projects related to that. And very strong reputation. We already had a number of projects where we're working together. So this was a very natural area for us to work together more and formalize that relationship a little bit more. So in the next few slides, we'll have a little bit more detail about some of the specific things that we're doing working together. Next slide.
So why AGI? And as Jeff mentioned earlier, basically there's been historically a strong links between PNNL and WSU and power systems technical area, and it's existed over decades. And as PNNL and WSU were looking at this, we wanted to look at how do we bring complementary and synergistic expertise, not kind of serendipitous as it happens around proposals, but how do we be more proactive as we look at a lot of the major challenges that we see. We also wanted to have an opportunity to the elevation of our two institutions in moving forward and trying to make some of the process more seamless. And then looking at how do we also increase our pipeline, both do we make sure that they're exciting projects about real problems for our students at WSU, as well as opportunities for our grad students, particularly to see what are the careers at a national lab. And then looking at, there's some opportunities that the lab has for funding calls, there's some opportunities that universities have. How do we collaborate together and also move forward across multiple WSU campuses, not just Pullman or Tri-Cities, but all of our campuses and moving forward with next steps of the power grid and power grid research.
So PNNL and WSU leadership is making an investment in AGI. So the co-directors are responsible to leadership in terms of the execution of the Institute. But we also are forming an industry advisory board, so opportunities for our industry stakeholders to get involved and weigh in on helping us prioritize some of our activities. But then we also have a number of senior technical leaders, including our joint appointments and affiliated researchers that are working on the various projects. But then a large opportunity for team members from both WSU and PNNL to get involved in the technical projects. So we do have a lot of, depending on who you are, if you're from industry or if you're from WSU, if you're from PNNL on this phone call, there's a large number of ways that you get involved in working with the AGI. Next slide.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a timeline to kind of talk about some of our different activities that have happened and a little bit about the evolution of AGI. So as Jeff mentioned early on, before 2008, there were a lot of interactions happening between PNNL and WSU in the advanced grid space. But then with the announcement of AGI in April of 2018, with the co-director of Dr. Anjan Bose working with Jeff, basically they created a draft strategic plan and some ideas of what they wanted to do. They also started looking at how do we leverage programs that already exist between WSU and PNNL, and two of those programs are the Distinguished Graduate Research Program, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, and then the joint appointments, where we actually have our colleagues from the other institution have a position and the ability to wear both hats and work in either environment, depending on their interests and the target of activities. In January of 2000, I was became the interim director, where we started to look at what were some next steps. And as we were searching for the permanent director, we started doing some internal discussions, and you see the two internal AGI days. We had one in April of 2020 and one in February, one in February of 2021, or March of 2021. And those were dates where we could actually talk to each other and learn more from each other. We had some relationships, but we wanted to make it broader beyond the one-to-one relationship in some of the researchers. And that gave us a chance to really learn from each other and learn more about more opportunities. We also started these AGI ESIC webinars, where we started presenting both technical work as well as strategic activities like we're discussing today. And then in January of 2021, we started our strategic plan activities, and we'll talk more about that in detail. And in one of the other big significant things that happened in the beginning of 2021, which I think is great timing, was the National Academies came out with a report of the future of electric power in the US. And two of our participants in AGI, Anjan Bose and Jeff Dagle, were on that committee of 15. So AGI was really at the table in those discussions. And as we look at that future and that strategic plan, as that is in parallel with our strategic plan, gave us a chance to really look at the bigger picture and see where AGI could fit in. In late August, we had actually our first AGI Industry Day, which was with our external audiences to talk about that. And moving forward, based on those interactions, we're working on our AGI 2022 plan, where we look at what do we want to accomplish in our different areas based on our strategic plan and our first steps in moving towards some of our longer term goals.
So one of the things that national laboratories like PNNL does is they have joint appointments with universities and other research organizations where we're working together on topics of common interest. And before the AGI existed, we didn't have any joint appointments in the power grid area. And so leveraging this joint institute, we created a few joint appointments that can serve as both, in the case of Dr. Henry Huang and Dr. Kevin Schneider, they are approved by the WSU Graduate Faculty Board to advise students and serve as WSU faculty, and they can be working with as a WSU researcher on projects and proposals and things related to the research that WSU is doing. So they have all of the privileges and opportunities and responsibilities as WSU faculty in that regard. Similarly, Dr. Noel Schulz and Dr. Manny Fenton-Subrium are on the PNNL staff, and they are working in the electricity infrastructure group at PNNL, and they are able to work directly with PNNL staff on PNNL projects without setting up a subcontract. So of course, you know, before these joint appointments existed, we could always collaborate and work together on things and have subcontracts, either a WC-led project subcontract at PNNL or vice versa. But these joint appointments give us additional opportunities for the staff to work more closely together. So we're very excited with the 4 joint appointees that we have with the AGI.
Sorry, Jeff, I was trying to close a window and it did that.
That's okay. You were moving me along.
No, I was not. I was not trying to. So the other program that is a PNNL WSU program, and we are working to advance it, to integrate that into AGI and even more and use the opportunities that we have, was the Distinguished Graduate Research Program. And this is a cool program because it gives you an opportunity to see both worlds, both the academic world as a PhD student and the national lab world as working with PNNL directly. And so we have had three different students at this point that have been involved in the DGRP and actually spent time at PNNL and worked to, and the idea is when you come in, several of these students were already here at WSU as the program was newer, but the idea is that as a student comes in, their first 2 years, they're on the WSU campus with collaborating with PNNL and talking about projects and opportunities, and they're getting their classwork out of the way and working. Then the students in years 3 and 4 actually move in non-COVID times, move to PNNL and actually work with the team there directly with discussions with their faculty advisor and committee. And so this really is a great way for students to see the different perspectives by working with the national grid. And Monish was one of our early students, and he actually started working at PNNL. So this has been part of our discussions that we've talked about related to how do we workforce and pipeline opportunities. And we've also had Gotham is finished and he has moved on to work at an electric utility. So it really provides a great opportunity for our PhD students to see many different areas and understand R&D in a couple different venues.
So another AGI collaboration that we're excited about is once a month we're given the opportunity to provide a seminar as part of the ESIC seminar series, including this hour today. In the spring series, we had in March, April, and I guess early April, late April, roughly once a month. We had 3 AGI hosted seminars. These are joint projects that involve researchers from both PNNL and WSU. We're here today talking about the AGI strategic plan. Next month, we'll have a presentation on the Grid Sandbox project. And in November, we'll have an update on the UI Assist project. And so these are featuring some of our key AGI activities during the ESIC seminar series. Next slide.
Yeah, so next we're going to talk about our timeline for our strategic planning. And as we mentioned, we started this in January, and we were fortunate to have a consultant, Jean Frankel, that had worked with WSU on some of its system strategic plans, as well as had worked with our other 2 institutes on strategic plans. And so we met with Jean to kind of talk about some of the strategies related to creating this plan, and had some high level. We had first a planning survey involving faculty and researchers and leaders. We had our AGI day where we had an interactive session where we had different breakout groups where we talked about questions. We then did some surveys, and then also had an industrial focus group where we had 2 industrial focus groups where we brought in different industrial partners to talk about what do they feel are important things that AGI can do in this space. And then we moved forward to publishing our plan in mid-June. So it was a longer process, but we felt good about the opportunity to get people from both PNNL and WSU involved in input, as well as a lot of our key industry partners to look at what are the challenges and opportunities as we have moved forward in the next 5 to 10 years.
So digging in a little bit deeper on the March 26th workshop that Noel talked about, on the right is a list of all of the core team from PNNL and WSU that were involved in helping to refine the information that was in the draft strategy document at that time, and looking at gathering input from these experts from surveys, and then having a half-day workshop to really dig in and discuss these issues, where we look at the core mission and values and how that relates to assumptions associated with the future and where the grid we think is going, to help us put together short and midterm goals. And really looking at these assumptions from the perspective of demographics, social, cultural, consumer values of customers of the power system, the regulatory environment that utilities will be dealing with, the economic climate in terms of how people pay for infrastructure and operating the infrastructure, as well as constructing new infrastructure, the nature of the field in terms of changes in technologies, as well as other scientific technological advances that will affect the way that we generate, deliver, and consume electricity. Next slide.
So I mentioned that we had 2 focus groups, and these were the invited companies that we had. There's obviously, we had companies around the Pacific Northwest, and we really had a great set of discussions with this breakout group. And one of the things we talked about is what are the research challenges, but also what are the workforce challenges as we look at, particularly as we look at students in the master's and PhD prepared areas. How do we make sure we have the right pipeline of students for the challenges that we have ahead? And this was really insightful in the discussions with all these different entities on where they saw, and they're coming from different point of views. We have electric utilities, we have technology providers, we have organizations that are representing larger groups of organizations, and manufacturers. So lots of different perspectives here, consultants, software, hardware. So this really helped us really see some of the different industry perspectives that we wanted to make sure as our customers and partners that we were moving in the direction that made sense for our industry as well.
So digging into a little bit more detail on these industry workshops we had in April, on the research priorities, asking these companies what are the key things that they're most worried about or focused on. And balancing intermittent generation is really one that rose to the top of almost all the discussions. They really see a big challenge there. When we have much more wind and solar and other non-dispatchable generation that's in the system, how do they handle that? And how do they balance the reliability needs and the resilience requirements with these goals that they have to have sustainable and clean electricity generation? There's also a recognition that there's challenges associated with new technologies that are associated with distribution and end use resources, what we call the so-called grid edge technologies. And really, how do you incorporate those into the system in a way that you maintain controllability of the overall asset? Because all of these new technologies are sort of driven based on computational and communication underlying technology, cybersecurity is very important. And some of those acronyms are energy management system, that's really controlling the transmission system, the advanced distribution management system, that's really controlling the distribution system, and how these information technologies and operational technologies work together. With all of these complexities and uncertainties, optimizing the overall grid associated with that is a key challenge. And the good news is I think that relates very well with some of the advanced technologies and research topics that both PNNL and WC are very interested in, as well as the artificial intelligence and machine learning and other applications associated with managing big data and big data analytics. On the workforce development priorities, we also heard that while they want future engineers that have a good grasp of the fundamentals, so when somebody graduates Washington State University with an electrical engineering degree, they want that person well versed in electrical engineering topics. They recognize that there is a need for people with multidisciplinary talent, so engineers that have been exposed to other things, not just knowing how to solve engineering symmetrical components equations, for example, but being exposed to cybersecurity topics and really having a breadth of knowledge of how these broader topics relate to the field of power systems engineering. They feel that students that have industry engagement through either internships or senior design projects have much more real-world experience. They can hit the ground running, and that's much more valuable than somebody that just comes out of the with their degree and only book knowledge. So really that practical hands-on capability. I kind of already alluded to computer science skills is key, and tying that in with power system knowledge. Being able to think about new technologies and how they really will apply to the future of the power grid. And then it's not also about new students coming out of universities, but also how can an organization like AGI, with the skills and capabilities that we have at PNNL and WSU, help train existing workers at these companies. And so the existing workforce training needs, and we have some ideas of things we might do with advanced simulator training or other types of topics that could be helpful there. And then one question that we asked all of those external industry companies is, what is one piece of advice that you can give to Dr. Schulz and myself as the co-directors of this institute? What one piece of advice would you give us? And we heard a very unanimous thing back, is that we really want to stay engaged and don't just go off into your ivory tower and work on these research topics and come back 5 years later and tell us what you worked on, but keep us engaged. And so I think that's good advice. And so we're really planning to take that to heart and work very closely with our external industry companies and other companies that are interested in the future of the power grid, and work together on solving these problems as opposed to just us going off on the side and working on them in a vacuum. Next slide.
Yeah, so finalizing this, we talked a little bit about this, but this is kind of a pictorial representation, and basically what do you do with the strategic plan once you have it. We had input from our industry partners, we had input from WSU and from PNNL. We did a survey on kind of the draft plan from a lot of the early participants and got information, got feedback on that, and then some of our core folks that were in that initial meeting kind of did a final review. And then we had a chance to present it to PNNL and WSU leadership to talk about where goals were, to make sure that they saw it, that we were taking advantage of where PNNL and WSU leadership saw some of the future opportunities there. And so, as I said, in June, we got our strategic plan. And so that's posted on our website and is there. But, you know, one of the important things as we talk about a strategic plan is how do we then, universities and other organizations have strategic plans all the time. And the idea isn't to put it on the website and in 10 years come back and redo it. It's actually to use it as a roadmap as we move forward. And so what the next step for us is to turn that into yearly goals and activities where we take the different parts of it that we'll talk about next, and we talk about what are some of our goals. And we decided to use the calendar year. As a university, our fiscal year is July to June. We have PNNL is October to September, and then we have the academic year. So we decided that the calendar year was a good way to do that because it's kind of something that's easy to, particularly publications and other things you can look at, things that happen in a particular year. So that's what we're moving forward to look at, creating these annual strategic plans.
So the outline in the strategic plan is we of course talk about some fundamental things like our core values and our mission and vision statement. But one thing is that these I was really impressed with the subcontractor to help us with this, walked us through a way to describe the future through these vivid descriptions. And so those are kind of neat to read through. It's a chance for, I don't know, it just happened my screen, kind of, there it comes back. But a chance for these vivid descriptions for the reader to really understand what we're thinking about in terms of the future vision statement. And so vignettes of things that we're expecting to happen in the future, and then that's what's driving our vision for this strategic plan through those vivid descriptions. So those are kind of fun to read because it's a real chance to have some very specific statements about some things that we think are likely to happen. But then behind those vivid descriptions, we then articulated assumptions about those future things, and then use that to develop outcome-oriented goals that would inform our research priorities, education input, as well as other ways that we can influence those outcomes and what we can do to collaborate on this going forward. One thing I will keep in mind is that a lot of what we work on is driven by project opportunities. And so we just can't, for the most part, just decide to work on something and go work on it just because we think it's the right thing to do. We need to write a proposal and convince a client to fund us to do specific activities. Most of our work is client driven in that regard. So we have some limitations with what we can work on just because we feel like it. But this plan helps us to lay out what we think is the important thing. And then that would give us a sense of what we can prioritize in terms of what opportunities to go after. How we can sort of pick and choose which opportunities we want to focus our energy on and increase our likelihood of winning certain proposals. If we pour more effort and energy into certain areas than other areas, we're going to likely influence our future of what we're working on based on those decisions that we can make, each day as we approach our tasks. So it is an important document, and as Noel previously mentioned, we intend it to be a living document. we'll continuously update it based on learning new things about what's going on and where the future is likely to be. But ultimately, it's got to be connected to what our clients are also interested in. And so that's the balancing trick with these types of activities. Next slide.
So our original mission and vision that was kind of at the start of when Jeff and Anjan first were started to kind of look at activities, and in 2018 was to look at creating this national scale simulation platform and data framework, and for the complex power systems of the future. And the vision was to build the reputation and prominence and help enable a resilient North American grid. As we went through our discussions and activities, we updated these to be a little bit, I think a little bit more general, to talk about how we're going to be part of the advanced grid modeling through its evolution, through research, through looking at supporting both the planning and the operations side with our complex power systems in the future that will incorporate the across multiple systems of systems, where we're looking at transportation being part of the grid. We're looking at the impact of natural gas and other fuels and how that impacts the grid. And so that's what we had in our mission you see here. The other thing we added was a little more direct connection to workforce, because as we talk about these activities, and particularly at the university, we're helping create the workforce of tomorrow. So we thought it was important to acknowledge the educational aspects that we're doing in partnering with ESIC, WSU ESIC and other groups on creating this workforce that is well trained in those areas we talked about that industry was worried about. We also wanted to be recognized. Our vision in the next 10 years is to be recognized as a key source, an engineering source related to the U.S. grid, but also the North American grid, but also how that influences the rest of the world. And as we talk about having an opportunity to look at system level modeling, if you go back to the National Academy's report, there's discussion about how we do different parts of it, but understanding the system and understanding the systems is an important part of that. And we feel AGI can be part of that discussion in our updated mission and vision.
There it is.
Jeff?
So, so this is a very complicated slide, but it's kind of fun, so that you don't get too overwhelmed. Start in the middle. And these are assumptions, future assumptions that are driven by external factors. And everything on the slide then is color coded. So red is demographics, and then green is societal, cultural, and consumer values. The kind of the darker green is regulatory environment. The lighter green is economic climate. The highlight is nature of the field. And then I guess that's kind of an orangey color, scientific and technological advances associated with that. And so these are sprinkled around the slide in terms of that color coding. I don't think there's any relevance to where they are on the slide, not at least that I'm aware of. So I think these are just sprinkled on here, but it's just showing a couple of things. One is that there's a lot of things that are feeding into the future of the power grid, and depending on the category of assumptions that we're talking about, there's a lot of different things that are going to influence the future, and so that leads to a very complex future that could be very different depending on how these assumptions play out. And so that's just kind of give you a flavor of the thought process that went into the strategic plan and some of the things that we were talking about there. Next slide.
And those are really the highlights, as Jeff said. We just tried to put some of those assumptions in there, and a lot there's overlap between some of the different colors in that. So we encourage you to go back to the strategic plan and see all the different assumptions that are there, and just see, because it's very relevant to our strategic plan. And it's only 8 pages, so it's not like it's a 80-page document. So, But next we wanted to, so we've come up with our mission and vision. We've set the vivid descriptions that Jeff talked about, what are some of our assumptions of the world moving forward, also, and our assumptions of a lot of the external forces. And so the next part of it is to look at outcomes-oriented goals. So what are things we can control? What are things we should be focusing on? And as Jeff said earlier, one of the things for our strategic plan is AGI cannot be all things to all people. And Jeff mentioned that we have clients, we have research sponsors, we have activities that are going on. And what we want to do is we want to look at our expertise and find ways on how does that work in this area in these four particular goal areas: research, education, influence, and institutional collaboration. And so under each of these, we actually had three different areas. We first had kind of an overarching goal that we had in that area. Then we had some objectives that we saw were things that quantifiable things that we could look at and review and try to see how we advance along with time with AGI. And then we had some possible strategies that we had. And our goal was to look at, this is the longer term 3 to 5 year focus. So what we wanted to do was to take some of the objectives, some of the strategies, and pick some each year to find ones that we would focus on in helping move AGI forward. And that becomes our annual plan that we're working on related to this. So next, what we want to do is kind of go through the goals and objectives for these 4 areas, and then we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about 2022.
So in the first one, research, the goal is that we'll have a robust portfolio of high impact projects that are aligned with our clients' key technologies and challenges. So we have about, today we have about 10 projects underway between PNNL and WSU associated with the AGI. Some of those are quite large projects, and so in a lot of ways we're already pretty well positioned associated with this goal, but really looking to build out that portfolio of a good set of projects. And so these 10 good projects tend to have stable or sustainable funding. So multi-year projects are preferred to just doing short-term projects where we're always having to have a lot of turnover and new things. And so looking for these opportunities where you have a stable route to funding is preferred. Looking to increase our partnerships. So as Noel just mentioned a little bit ago, AGI, we're looking to contribute to the future of the power grid, but it's a big problem. There's a lot of moving parts to this problem. There's a lot of people that are involved in this problem. So increasing our partnerships in terms of not only industry, but other universities and other national laboratories. That's really key. And so we're looking specifically at West Virginia University as a key partner in some of these things. But certainly regional and national and international are all very important opportunities for us. The alignment connection with industry is very important. I mentioned the size of the project. Not all projects are created equal. Some are more significant than others. And then having a portfolio management to where we understand sort of how the projects interrelate to each other, so we can kind of look at some of these synergies and leveraging opportunities, but also understanding if a big project is wrapping up, what will be the next thing that people can work on. So really looking at this from a portfolio management perspective. And then finally, we're very often asked for impact metrics. How many publications have we generated in the last quarter? Do we have any evidence that our research that we're doing is actually being used by other people? And so tech transfer and demonstration projects and in ways that we can demonstrate specific impact. Those are things that we're always asked to provide. And so we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of those impact metrics. Next slide.
So education, we have our goal is to excel in workforce development, both current and future workforce, and to have students connected with industry challenges through their interactions with AGI, and a source of training for existing power engineers at the rapid pace of changing technology. So, one of the big things we want to do is get more students involved in AGI activities to see the opportunities, our WSU students to see the opportunities in the National Lab, to look at some of the differences we have between some of the research we might do at a university and some of the that's done at the National Lab. What are the similarities? What are the differences? How do we work together on that? We also want to increase more industry engineers that are involved in AGI projects. So how do we get industry involved in that? And looking at the future workforce, we mentioned earlier, we want to look at the intersection of computer science in the electric grid space. And that can be from cybersecurity to data analytics to machine learning to data science. But how do we work to have more fusion of those areas and moving forward? Workforce training we talked about. We also want to see our students placed in key organizations. We want to have more graduate students, a total of more graduate students in the power related areas based on our interactions. And then also look at programmatic funding where we have opportunities to maybe do fellowships. We just recently found out yesterday actually that we got a GAN fellowship. And so we'll have AGI as part of that, looking at computer science, computer science and power activities. And then we also want to make sure we're looking at how do we increase the number of women and underrepresented students that are involved in AGI in learning about these education and research opportunities. Jeff?
Yeah, it looks like there's a little bit of a latency here. Okay, so influence. So one of the things that we want to be increasingly known as a thought leader and an influential knowledge source of technology and policy development for advanced power systems. So really that name recognition where people outside of the AGI team have heard of AGI, they kind of know what we're about, they know what we're doing, really having visibility, not only for the Institute itself, but also the individual researchers. I think that's something that we're striving for. Just as a side note, one of the things that I'm involved in at the laboratory is working with something called NASP, the North American Synchrophaser Initiative. And one of the ways that I knew that NASP was making a big impact was when I would hear people talking about NASP to me. And that was really gratifying when somebody would come up to me and be talking to me about something called NASP. And so I'm waiting for the day when somebody will approach me to, somebody from industry or some other company or somewhere else will talk to me about this thing called AGI and, hey, I heard about this AGI. Do you know anything about it? Then I'll know for sure that, the word's getting out and we're having a big impact. So the way we're planning to do that is, have more papers and publications and presentations and outreach to really make sure that our name's known. But what we want to be is known for is the thought leadership. We want to be known as really thinking about the future of the grid and what the needs are for research and workforce to tie into that. And so that's really that reputation piece. Next slide.
Yeah, so can you hear me okay? I guess there's some issues with my wireless.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, so our last area is in institutional collaboration. And obviously one of the big things, and Judd Verdon talks about, we want 1 + 1 to be greater than 2. We want to make sure we have ways that we have benefits beyond where we were in 2018 when we started. How do we increase collaboration and really have some internal investment to help us leverage and encourage new activities. So how do we look at resources both within WSU and PNNL? And then how do we lower the barriers for collaboration and data sharing? You know, one of the things, we have a couple projects where we're working with a electric utility on maybe a different project, but they make sense for another project we're working on. For instance, with UI Assist, our US India project, we've actually found a couple other projects that PNNL is working with, and in some cases, a different group at WSU is working with. And how do we share that data to leverage and make the most of the activities we're doing? And I think that's going to be really important as we move forward in impacting both each of our organizations and also the AGI technical space, that we can use those internal activities to do initial work. And you'll hear more about that with the sandbox next month, is an internal investment that creates a platform that then can be used in other technical areas and for many of our partners as next steps related to trying things. And so we really want to leverage those internal investments and make it better for both of us in the activities. And lowering those barriers and paperwork and processes, as we've learned over the last 3 years, is sometimes easier said than done. But we've been able to move it forward and we'll continue to find ways to do that.
So what we've done is talk about what we've accomplished in terms of the strategic plan and kind of where we started from as a joint institute, and what AGI is and what we did with the strategic plan development, how we developed it, what it includes. So what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes now talking about what's next and ways to get involved.
Yeah, so we've talked about the annual plan now. So what we want to do is get this strategic plan into tasks and activities and strategies moving forward. And so one of the things, when you looked at what we had there on previously in some of our goals and objectives, was we saw that we wanted to increase. And so one of the important things we have in several of these areas is to create some baselines and some targets. So when we say increase, what are our goals that we want to, what are we trying to target related to number of publications, related to number of projects, both diversity of projects as well as both partners and all those kind of things. So first, we really need to get a baseline on where we are in those, and then we need to be able to set those targets on where we want to be in 10 years, but then what are our incremental that we want to do each year making progress. We also talked about the advisory board. That's one of our priorities for 2022, is to create that advisory board and work on how do we integrate with that to look at our partners that we're working with now and future partners. What are things we should be doing and considering? As Jeff said earlier, making sure that we're considering our clients, our partners that are out there, and what are their needs, not necessarily just the areas that we think we can contribute. And also looking at new funding sources of opportunities for AGI activities and looking at that. So those are some of our big research activities, is looking at those metrics and then looking at funding as well as the advisory board. In the education area, very important also on the baselines, we talked about increasing women and underrepresented students, increasing the number of undergrads and graduate students that are involved and know about AGI. So those are metrics we need to set up, and then we can develop some programs to meet those targets. The big thing in the education area is we're hiring 3 new faculty at WSU with ties to AGI areas. And we're excited about this. The ad should go out in the near future, probably this week or next week, to really get that out. And we're excited. There's actually these ad is for multi-career, multi-level, so assistant, associate, and full professors. And so we're excited to see the new team members that we bring to the table across, particularly in WSU Pullman, for these particular positions. Influence, again, metrics. We also want to look at nominating AGI researchers for awards and recognition that they deserve, whether that's IEEE Fellow, Washington Academy of Sciences, and other awards. within IEEE PES. We're expanding our external communications. We started a quarterly e-newsletter, and we're going to continue that. Our big project and influence, which kind of overlaps with both research and education as well, is we would like to create an impact paper for what are the challenges in the Pacific Northwest. As we look at the U.S., different parts of the countries have different generation mixes and different challenges and opportunities, and we want to see what do we think are the key issues for the Pacific Northwest as it responds to the National Academy's report. And then we want to continue our industry interactions. How do we build on our AGI Industry Day and our next steps related to industry interactions? And then we want to work with our internal programs. There's several programs that we already have between WSU and PNNL. How do we leverage those for AGI? Some of them are generic to any relationship with PNNL and WSU. And we also want to connect across all our system campuses. We have power faculty on multiple campuses, and how do we involve them in some of the activities from an educational and a research standpoint and moving forward.
So how do I get involved? Well, it depends on who you are. If you're from industry or another organization, and you're a member of ESIC, you know, there's a lot of ways that you can get involved working with us through the ESIC connection. If you're not a member of ESIC, join ESIC. But there's a lot of ways that ESIC and AGI work together in terms of reaching out and involving industry and bringing folks in to work with us on our projects as partners, as well as demo host sites and things like that. So there's a myriad of opportunities to get involved if you're from industry, if you're from utility or other local or regional industry. There's lots of opportunities there. So if that's your category, and you're not a member of ESIC, I strongly encourage you to join ESIC. If you're an undergraduate student, these research projects often involve, you know, there might be a senior design project that might come up or other types of opportunities. But also be on the lookout for internships. And I know I would like to have more, we host several internships at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, but it's also okay if you want to do a different national laboratory. It's also very okay if you want to do another utility or some other company that's involved in the power grid. But internships are extremely valuable thing to round out your career as an undergraduate student. If you're a graduate student, we have a number of additional opportunities, including the Distinguished Graduate Research Program Fellowship, directly getting involved in the research project, as well as internships as well for you. And if you're a WSU professor on the faculty or staff, or you're a PNNL staff member or researcher, then I challenge you to learn more about our partner organization. So if you're a WSU person, learn more about PNNL. If you're a PNL person, learn more about WSU. And through that, knowing a little bit more about this organization and who some of the key people are and what they're working on, that will lead to collaboration opportunities where we can find new things to work on in the future, new proposals to write, new projects to undertake, new papers to collaborate on as co-authors. There's all sorts of ways to get involved. If you have any specific ideas of things that you think AGI could be doing that we're not doing, please talk to Dr. Schulz or myself. We would love to hear from you. So lots of ways to get involved. Next slide.
So we'll open it up to questions or discussion.
Thank you, Noel and Jeff, for an excellent presentation and for updating us on AGI activities and several aspects around how to get involved. I had a question about involvement, and I think Jeff's last slides answered those questions already. So let me open it up for the audience for any questions that you might have. You may unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can post it on chat. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. So any final comments, Noel and Jeff, that you would want our attendees to know before we hang up for today?
Well, from my perspective, Anamika, thank you for hosting us, inviting us to give this presentation for this month's or this week's ESIC seminar. We really appreciate the opportunity to share what we're working on, and so thank you for letting us share.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure to have you here and talk about these things.
Yeah, and I would just say, you know, Jeff and I are both resources. As you see proposals coming in and you don't know someone in the other organization, you know, come to us. We had one that was solar related to pollinators. So we got our ag school involved and extension involved in that. So there are unique opportunities that are out there, and if we don't know who to get involved, we'll keep helping on that perspective. So, and I just want to echo also what Jeff said earlier. We continue to work with ESIC and partner together related to our activities. ESIC and PNNL and the AGI directors and code directors get together every other week to talk about opportunities that we have. There are also opportunities both on the PNNL and WSU area and the energy area, the Nuclear Institute, the Biofuels Institute. We also see Charge and some other groups on the WSU side. So we continue to work and leverage in the energy issue area in addition with ESIC. So if we can help in any way, and if grad students have questions about DGRP or how to get involved, they can feel free to reach out. I posted our emails on there, and the PowerPoint will be up and on the website if people have questions on some of those links. And like Jeff said, we appreciate the opportunity to share. We're very excited about moving things forward and having our strategic plan now and being able to see some progress towards that.
Excellent. Thank you. It was a pleasure to have both of you here for today's seminar. Thank you everyone for attending, and I'll conclude today's seminar. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.